For generations before us, gardeners and farmers didn't have access to shelves lined with chemical fertilizers. They didn't rely on expensive bags of synthetic nutrients to push their crops along. Instead, they worked with natural, time-tested materials that fed the soil slowly and effectively. One of the most powerful of these old methods has nearly disappeared from modern gardening practices, and yet it remains one of the best tools for restoring fertility, feeding microbes, and creating lasting soil health. That forgotten biofertilizer is farmyard manure, not in its raw, fresh form, but in the aged, composted version that your grandparents once relied on for nearly every crop. When handled properly, it doesn't just fertilize plants, it transforms the very structure and life of the soil beneath your feet. When people today hear the word manure, they often think of a smelly, messy material that burns plants if applied directly. But the manure your grandparents used was nothing like that. It wasn't raw waste scooped straight from a barn floor. It was manure carefully aged, mixed with bedding straw or hay, piled, turned, and left to compost until it became dark, crumbly, and rich with humus. By the time it reached the fields or garden beds, it had transformed into a balanced soil amendment teeming with microbial life. This material carried slow-release nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and calcium, all bound in organic matter that plants could absorb over time. Unlike modern fertilizers that spike nutrients and fade quickly, aged manure fed soil biology first, which in turn fed plants in a steady cycle. It was essentially the first true biofertilizer, long before we coined that term, because its power came from microbes rather than chemicals. The difference between raw manure and the biofertilizer your grandparents trusted is critical. Raw manure can indeed be dangerous in the garden. It carries pathogens, can be excessively high in ammonia, and risks burning roots and leaves if applied directly. But once aged or composted, the story changes completely. During the composting process, heat destroys harmful organisms, excess nitrogen stabilizes, and the material becomes safe, balanced, and biologically active. Your grandparents didn't call this process thermophilic composting or nutrient stabilization, but that's exactly what was happening. The manure matured into something entirely different from its raw starting point. It became a soil conditioner that improved texture, increased water retention in sandy soils, and helped loosen compacted clays. It also acted as a food web booster, bringing worms, fungi, and beneficial bacteria to life in the soil. Applying aged manure is about timing and placement as much as material. One of the reasons this biofertilizer worked so well in the past is that it was applied with care and at the right time of year. Farmers and gardeners knew that fresh piles dumped onto growing crops would do more harm than good, so manure was typically spread in the fall or early winter. By the time spring planting arrived, rains and soil organisms had already begun to integrate it into the soil. This created a fertile, living environment for seedlings. In modern gardens, the same principle applies. Aged manure should be applied several weeks before planting to give time for microbial activity to stabilize. Incorporating it lightly into the topsoil or laying it as a surface mulch allows worms and microbes to carry it deeper without the gardener needing to till heavily. For perennial crops like fruit trees and berry bushes, a ring of aged manure applied at the drip line can provide months of steady feeding. Timing and placement matter just as much as the quality of the material itself. Not all manures are equal, and knowing the difference really protects your soil. Cow manure, for example, is mild, balanced, and excellent for building soil humus. Horse manure, often mixed with straw bedding, adds bulk and improves soil aeration, but it definitely benefits from longer aging. Poultry manure is far richer in nitrogen and phosphorus, making it a potent fertilizer once composted, but honestly, it's just too strong if applied fresh. Rabbit manure is unique because it's considered cold, meaning it can sometimes be applied directly in small amounts without burning plants, though, yeah, aging still improves its balance. Your grandparents often had access to all of these, depending on what animals were on the farm, and they adjusted how they applied them based on experience. Today, many gardeners can still source these manures from local farms, stables, or even backyard livestock owners. The key is not just in obtaining them, but in understanding their differences and preparing them correctly so they become the true biofertilizer of old, rather than a raw input that risks damaging soil life. The microbial engine inside aged manure is what truly revives soil. The nutrients inside manure are important, but what really made this material powerful in your grandparents' gardens was the living engine it carried. As manure aged, microbial communities flourished. Bacteria that fix nitrogen, fungi that build soil aggregates, and actinomycetes that break down tough organic fibers all found a home in the composting process. When applied to soil, aged manure didn't just add nutrients, it seeded the soil with armies of beneficial organisms that multiplied and spread. These microbes are the foundation of healthy soil structure and fertility, and honestly, their activity is what turns dead dirt into living soil. Modern chemical fertilizers, well, they bypass this entire cycle by feeding plants directly, but they leave soil life depleted over time. The forgotten biofertilizer your grandparents used worked with the soil's biology, not against it, which is why its effects lasted season after season. For today's gardeners, the pathway to using this biofertilizer again is straightforward. The first step is sourcing good quality manure that hasn't been contaminated with herbicide-laced hay or bedding. Persistent herbicides can pass through animals and remain active in manure, damaging gardens for years. This is where vigilance really matters. Once clean manure is obtained, composting it for 6 months to a year is, honestly, ideal. Piles should be turned occasionally to allow oxygen in, and moisture should be maintained so the material stays active without going anaerobic. When ready, the manure should be dark, crumbly, and free of offensive odor. At that stage, it can be used in garden beds as top dressing for perennials, or even mixed into potting blends at a safe ratio. The goal is not to smother the soil with heavy layers, but to integrate it as a steady, biologically active amendment. With proper application, plants respond with stronger growth, improved resilience, and honestly, better flavor and nutrition in harvests. Perhaps the greatest wisdom your grandparents held was that manure was not just about feeding crops for one season, it was about building soil that could support generations of growing. Each year's application layered more organic matter into the ground, improved tilth, and created a sponge-like soil capable of holding both nutrients and water. This was true sustainability long before the word became popular. Today, gardeners looking for long-term fertility and resilience can do the same. By reviving the use of aged farmyard manure, we reconnect with a practice that values the soil as a living system, not just a medium for plants. In an era of expensive inputs and depleted soils, this old method offers a pathway back to abundance. The forgotten biofertilizer your grandparents used is not complicated, flashy, or expensive. It's simple, natural, and honestly, it's been proven by centuries of successful gardening. Properly aged manure transforms gardens by feeding microbes, improving soil structure, and delivering nutrients in balance with the needs of plants. When applied at the right time and in the right way, it becomes the backbone of a sustainable system that outlasts quick fixes. If serious gardeners want to unlock the same fertility that kept past generations thriving, the solution may be waiting in a composted pile of manure. Revive this old practice and the results will speak for themselves. For more deep dives into soil revival, ancient gardening wisdom, and modern applications of time-tested methods, subscribe to Soil and Plant Doctor and share this video with fellow growers who care about building lasting fertility. Together, we can bring back the forgotten tools that keep soil alive.